Those divorce papers were sitting right there in my messenger bag, feeling as heavy as a mountain. I hadn't put my signature on them yet, but the ink was ready and the decision felt final. It's a bitter pill to swallow, realizing that over 2 decades of marriage, 22 years of building a life, a home, and a history, had been reduced to a stack of legal jargon designed to tear it all down. I'd actually hit my breaking point about 3 weeks ago. I was sitting in my downtown office, late as usual, thinking about another one of those silent dinners, where the only sound was the clinking of silverware. We were living under the same roof, sure, but we were light years apart. See, I run a mid-sized tech firm. I'm the CEO, so making the hard calls is just part of my Tuesday. I've had to look people in the eye and tell them they don't have a job anymore. But this felt different. It didn't feel like a business move. It just left me feeling hollow, like there was nothing left inside. Still, I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. My wife and I had become total strangers. Our talks were basically just logistical updates, who's handling the electric bill or what the calendar looked like for the week. Even when we crawled into bed at night, we stayed on our respective sides of the mattress, careful not to even let an elbow brush against each other. The life had just leaked out of us so slowly that I couldn't even tell you when the tank went dry. That Thursday, I decided to duck out of work a little early to have one final sit-down with my lawyer before handing over the paperwork. It was a quick meeting since we already had the details squared away. Since I had some time to kill before I had to be home, I just started driving. No map, no plan, just wandering the city. I eventually pulled over near the Riverside Café. It's this little spot in the artsy district that my wife used to mention every now and then. I figured I'd grab a coffee and try to get my head on straight before I went home to have the conversation that would end our lives as we knew them. The place was exactly what you'd expect. Exposed brick, a bunch of mismatched chairs, and that thick smell of roasted beans and sugar. I flipped open my laptop to try and focus on some contracts, but the words just blurred together. My mind kept drifting back to that envelope in my bag. Then I heard it, a laugh. It was a sound I knew better than my own name, this specific melodic laugh that was the reason I fell for her all those years ago. Honestly, I hadn't heard that sound in months, maybe years. I looked through a small gap in the bookshelf and there she was, sitting by the window with 3 other women. My first instinct was to bolt for the door, but I was frozen to the spot. "I'm telling you, I don't know how you deal with him," one of them said. She was loud enough that the whole shop could probably hear her. I recognized the voice. It was Eleanor, a woman from my wife's book club. "He's just so icy. He's like a robot," another one chimed in. "Does the guy even have a pulse?" My chest tightened up. I knew I should have walked out right then and there, before things got worse. But I stayed. I sat there like a ghost, listening to her friends tear my character and my marriage to pieces. They brought up a gallery opening from last month where I apparently didn't say enough to satisfy them. "It was embarrassing," Eleanor added. "And that dinner at the Whitakers? He stayed for an hour. 1 hour. He didn't even bother to socialize. You're basically a single woman at these events." I was gripping my coffee mug so hard I thought it might shatter. Everything they said was just confirming the dark thoughts I'd been having. I was the problem. I was the broken one who failed at being a husband. I have to ask, what would you do in this situation? Would you have walked out, or would you have stayed to hear the rest? "That's enough." My wife's voice cut through their gossip like a knife. It was sharper than I'd heard it in a long time. "We're just looking out for you, Eleanor," her friend said, using that fake sweet tone. "You deserve more than—" I said that's enough. Her voice was like cold steel now. "None of you have the slightest clue what you're talking about." The cafe went dead silent. I leaned in toward the shelf, my heart hammering against my ribs. What she said next completely flipped the script on everything I thought I knew about us. "He isn't cold," she told them, her voice trembling just a bit. "He's exhausted." Those words felt like a physical weight in the room. I watched her through the books as she set her tea down with that careful, deliberate motion she uses right before she says something that matters. "You want to know why he left that party after an hour?" she asked, her voice gaining strength. "It's because he'd already clocked an 18-hour day. He got home at 7, took a 5-minute shower, threw on a suit, and drove us across town because he knew I really wanted to go. He's been survive on 4 hours of sleep for months because he's trying to save 200 people's jobs by closing a merger. Well, that's his choice. Eleanor started to snap back, but my wife wasn't having it. No, you're going to listen to me. You've spent 20 minutes trashing my husband while I sat here, and I am finished with it. All of it. I felt something shift in my chest. A weird mix of shock and a tiny spark of hope. This didn't sound like a woman who was done with me. It sounded like someone defending something she loved. He doesn't talk at your parties because he's an introvert who spends his entire day making calls that change people's lives, she said. By the time he gets to your events, his tank is empty. But he shows up anyway. He shows up because I asked him to, and he knows it's important to me. If it's that hard for him, maybe he should just stay home, the third woman suggested. I couldn't even remember her name. If he really loved you, he'd make an effort. My wife gave this bitter little laugh. If he really loved me? Do you know what he did last Tuesday? He cleared his entire morning. Board meetings, investor calls. Just because I mentioned my car was making a weird noise. He took it to the shop himself and sat there for 2 hours to make sure I had it back for the day. I remembered that. I didn't think it was a big deal. She needed the car, so I handled it. That's just basic manners, Eleanor said, waving it off. That's not love. He leaves me notes. My wife interrupted, her voice getting soft. In my books. He puts sticky notes on pages he thinks I'd like, or points out things an author got wrong because he knows I love a good debate. He reads the same heavy books I do, even when he's exhausted, just so we have something to talk about. I'd honestly forgotten about those notes. I started doing that years ago when we grew apart. I figured she didn't even notice them, that it was just a failed attempt to reach her. Last month, you asked why he seems so distant, she continued. It's because every time we go to one of your things, someone takes a shot at him. His clothes, his job, his personality. I've watched you people wear him down for 3 years, watching him try to be someone else just to fit into a group he never wanted to be a part of. The silence that followed was heavy. I sat there frozen, my coffee cold, feeling the world shift under my feet. That's not fair, Eleanor said weakly. See what? That I picked the wrong man? That I should want someone loud and flashy? My wife's voice cracked. I fell for him because he's the real deal. When he says something, he means it. He shows he loves me by what he does, not what he says. He's loyal, he's steady, and he's brilliant in ways none of you ever tried to see. I put my hand over my mouth, terrified I'd make a sound. Those divorce papers in my bag felt like a massive mistake. A total failure to see what was right in front of me. If you can't respect my husband, she said quietly, then I don't think we can be friends. Eleanor looked stunned. You can't be serious. We've been friends for 5 years. No, my wife said firmly. You've been looking down on him. There's a big difference. I watched her reach for her bag, her hands shaking. She admitted she'd been making excuses for a long time because she didn't want to lose that circle of friends. But she finally realized they were just dripping poison into her heart. The third woman, Margot, I remembered her name finally, sounded offended. That's a bit dramatic. We just think you could be having more fun. Fun? My wife pushed back. By being with someone less serious? Someone less dedicated? My husband works 60 hours a week to build something that matters. He provides a life that lets me teach and go after my PhD. He didn't complain once when I decided to go back to school at 43. He didn't tell me it was a waste of time. I'd completely forgotten she'd even worried about that. To me, it was a no-brainer. It was her dream. You're making us sound like monsters, Eleanor said, her voice turning cold. We're just pointing out that you've become invisible. When was the last time he actually took you somewhere or talked about something other than a schedule? We catch up every single Sunday morning, my wife said, her voice dropping to a low, steady hum. We sit out on the porch with our coffee and we just talk about the books we've got our noses in, about big ideas, about the stuff that actually matters. We've kept that tradition for 15 years. But you wouldn't know a thing about that because it's private. It belongs to us and nobody else. Sunday mornings. Hearing her say it out loud, it hit me like a physical blow. Those quiet hours on the porch were the only thing that had been keeping my head above water. I'd let it become such a routine that I almost forgot how much those mornings meant to me. It was the one window of time every week where we weren't just the co-managers of a household. We were actually us. "Then why do you always look so miserable?" Margot asked. She sounded like she genuinely didn't get it. "Every time we see you, you're stressed to the max and a million miles away. We just assumed." "You assumed my husband was the anchor dragging me down," my wife cut in. "But the truth is, I've been making myself miserable trying to keep up appearances with people who don't even respect the man I chose to marry." She took a long breath. "I've been sitting on this for weeks. I'm done with the book club. I'm done with the parties and the constant social climbing that just leaves me feeling empty at the end of the day." My heart was absolutely thumping. She'd been planning to walk away from them, not me. While I was busy hiding divorce papers in my bag, she was getting ready to cut out the very things I thought she lived for. "You're going to end up all by yourself," Eleanor warned, her voice dripping with bitterness. "You'll be trapped with a man who barely speaks to you, who can't give you what you need." "He gives me everything I need," my wife said, and I could hear her voice crack just a tiny bit. "The problem is I've been too exhausted from performing for all of you to show him that. I come home from these lunches feeling judged, and I carry that poison right back into my marriage. I've been acting cold and distant, and he's been trying to figure out what he did wrong. That makes him pull away even more, and then you guys label him as unavailable. It's a cycle, and I'm breaking it." She saw it. She'd actually mapped out the whole mess. While I was busy beating myself up for being a failure, she had diagnosed exactly what was killing us. "This is a massive mistake," Eleanor said, standing up with a huff. "You're going to regret picking him over your friends." "I'm not picking him over you," my wife replied, cool as a cucumber. "I'm choosing my marriage over friendships that were suffocating it. I'm choosing to be real instead of putting on a show." Eleanor grabbed her coat, her movements sharp and pissed off. "Fine. Just don't come crying to us when you're bored and lonely in your quiet little life." "I won't be," my wife said. "I never was before I met you. Goodbye, Eleanor." I watched through the books as the two of them stormed out, making a scene on their way to the door. Margot lingered for a second, looking a bit sheepish. "I'm sorry," she finally muttered. "I didn't realize. I really thought we were helping." My wife's expression softened, but only a little. "I know you did, but wanting to help doesn't erase the damage you caused." Once Margot left, my wife collapsed back into her chair. She covered her face with her hands, and I saw her shoulders start to shake. She was crying. Not those big, loud sobs, but those quiet, bone-deep tears of someone who's been carrying the world on their back for way too long. I should have run to her right then, but I just sat there, trying to process how wrong I'd been about everything. Those divorce papers felt like an indictment of my own blindness. How did I miss this? How was I so wrapped up in my own flaws that I didn't see her drowning right next to me? After a few minutes, she wiped her face and pulled out her phone. My pocket buzzed almost instantly. It was a text from her, "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." In the past, I would have seen that as her avoiding me. Now I knew better. She wasn't hiding. She was just trying to protect me from seeing her this worn out. She was trying to pull herself together before she walked through our front door. I finally made my move. I stood up, straightened my jacket, and walked around the bookshelf. When I pulled out the chair across from her, she looked up, totally startled. Pure horror washed over her face as she realized I might have heard the whole thing. "How long have you been there?" she whispered. "Long enough," I said. "I've spent half my life making high-stakes business moves and keeping a poker face, but sitting there, I didn't have any of that CEO polish left. Long enough to hear you stand up for me, and long enough to realize I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life." Her eyes went wide. "What are you talking about?" I reached into my bag, pulled out that heavy envelope, and set it on the table. I didn't open it. I just let it sit there like a confession. She looked at the envelope, then back at me, and I watched the gears start to turn. No, she breathed. Were you actually going to? I thought you were miserable, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I thought I was failing you. Every time we went out, I saw disappointment in your eyes. Every conversation we had just fizzled out. I thought the kindest thing I could do was let you go. Let me go. She looked absolutely devastated. I never wanted to be away from you. I wanted to be away from them. She pointed to the empty chairs. I wanted to stop the performing and the judgment. They were convincing me our marriage was broken when it wasn't. But we hardly talk anymore, I countered. We hardly touch. We're like roommates who just share a mortgage. We're just two exhausted people who forgot how to keep the world out of our business, she said. She reached across the table and, after a heartbeat of hesitation, put her hand over mine. It was the first time she'd reached out to touch me in months. I'm just so tired. But not of you. Never of us. I turned my hand over and locked my fingers with hers. I'm worn out too, I told her. The merger, the office politics. The weight of every single choice. I come home with nothing left, and then it felt like you needed me to be the social, charming guy that I just couldn't be. I felt like I was letting you down. You never let me down, she said firmly. I'm the one who failed us. I let those friends come first. I let their voices get inside my head until I started looking at you through their eyes instead of my own. I forgot why I fell in love with you in the first place. We just sat there for a while, holding hands across a sticky café table, watching years of misunderstanding finally start to untangle. What happened to us? I finally asked. We used to be a team. Emotional burnout, she said softly. For both of us. We've been running on empty for so long we forgot we were supposed to be each other's recharge, not just another thing draining our energy. She hit the nail on the head. I'd been so buried in being the provider that I'd stopped treating our marriage as something that needed its own care. And she'd been so busy trying to maintain a social life, she didn't even like that she'd worn herself down to nothing. I don't want a divorce, I said. Felt so obvious now. I want my wife back. I want our Sunday mornings and the notes in the books. I want to be with someone who knows that just because we're quiet doesn't mean something's wrong. I don't want one either, she said, giving my hand a squeeze. I want to remember how to be us again without everyone else's input. No more performances, just us. I took that envelope and, without even looking inside, I ripped it right down the middle. Then I tore it again. The scraps fell on the table like the remains of a disaster we'd just barely dodged. Where do we even start? I asked. She looked at the torn paper and gave me a real, genuine smile. We start by going home, she said. We start by admitting we've been so busy surviving that we forgot to actually live. We walked out of that cafe together, side by side with our hands locked. It felt a little strange, honestly. A simple thing we'd given up on a long time ago. In the car, the silence didn't feel heavy anymore. Felt like a fresh start. I need to tell you something, she said, looking straight ahead through the windshield. After this semester, I'm taking a break from my PhD. My first instinct was to tell her not to. She was so close. But I caught myself. Why? I asked instead. Because I'm drowning, she admitted. Between teaching, the research, and trying to keep up that social life, I've got nothing left for anyone. Especially you. I need to step back and remember what actually matters. My degree is important, sure, but not more than our life together. I pulled into the driveway of the house we'd lived in for 12 years. I'm going to start handing off more at work, I said. I've been terrified the place would go under without me micromanaging, but I've got a good team. I need to trust them. I need to stop acting like being exhausted is some kind of trophy. We've both been acting like martyrs, she observed, sacrificing our happiness for the sake of being productive. We went inside, and the house felt different, or maybe we just felt different being in it. We ended up in the kitchen, and I did something I hadn't done in a year. I cooked. Just some pasta and red sauce the way I used to when we first started out. We sat at the counter and we talked. Really talked. No phones, no TV, just us. We made a plan. Not some grand, impossible promise, but small, real changes. Sunday mornings were now officially off-limits to the world. We do a weekly 15-minute check-in just to see how we were feeling, not just what chores were done. And we were going to stop saying yes to things just to be polite. "What about friends?" she asked. "I pretty much burned those bridges today." "You'll make new ones," I told her. "Or maybe we'll realize we're enough for each other right now. We aren't isolating, we're just being picky. We're protecting what matters instead of putting on a show for people who don't actually care." That night, we didn't stay on our own sides of the bed. We ended up in the middle, talking in the dark like we did when we first bought the place. "I heard what you said in the café," I whispered. "About me not being cold, just tired. Did you mean that?" "Every word," she said. "You show me you love me every day. I just forgot how to hear it." "I need to say it more," I admitted. "I love you. I assumed you knew, but assumptions are how we got into this mess." "I love you too," she whispered back. I never stopped. I just forgot how to show it. Looking back a few months later, it's scary how close we came to the edge. Those divorce papers are long gone, replaced by a marriage that's actually honest. My wife took that break from her PhD to find her footing again. I promoted some good managers and finally got my evenings back. And as for Eleanor, my wife hasn't spoken to her since. Last week, she left a note in the book I was reading. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being exactly who you are." I wrote back in hers. "Thank you for defending us. I choose you again every single time. We're building something stronger now. Something that can handle the storms because we aren't guessing anymore." I almost walked out on the best thing in my life. Instead, I walked back in. And every Sunday morning, sitting on that porch with our coffee, I remember exactly why it was worth the fight.